lesson 28. And so lesson 28, 29, and 30 are all about me verbs. So 28 mainly talks about didωμι, 29 talks about διδωμι, and 30 talks about histωμι. So these are, you can see they've thrown in a few others like FEME, and FEME, and so on. But those three, didωμι, διδωμι, and histωμι, are the most common me verbs in the New Testament. And if you learn these three forms, you should be able to recognize basically any me verb that you come across. Because many of the me verbs are actually compounds of these me verbs, like paradidomi, right? Didomi means to give, paradidomi means to hand over. So, okay. We are going to talk about me verbs. So what is a me verb? Me verbs end in me. So just looking at the present forms of didωμι, you can see didωμι, didos, didosin, didomen, didote, didoasin. And so if you've been practicing your chant from the first couple of chapters, right? O, is, e, om, and eta, usin. You can see O is different, right? So me is not O. So there's a difference. That's why we call them me verbs, because they have me rather than O here. Is, you still have the sigma, although you don't have the epsilon. O, is, e. This is different, very different. Seen here in the third singular rather than the third singular that you're used to. And then omen, eta, those are the same. And then usin, we have asin rather than usin. And so that's a little different, but it's still recognizable. But those three, me, sin, and asin, are the three differences that you will have to note. Okay, so only a handful of words are me verbs in, or words with the forms that are me verbs. There are many. Didωμι is a very common word. So there's lots of words in the New Testament that are me verbs, but there's only a handful of forms or words that form this way. So we have to learn them. Okay, I find Bill Mounts has a Greek textbook, and he gives 5 rules of me verbs, and I find these helpful. So we're going to go over Bill Mounts' 5 rules, and these can help us to at least have some foundations for when we're looking at me verbs. Well, what are we looking at? So rule 1, this is significant. Me verbs reduplicate their initial stem letter to form the present and separate the reduplicated consonant with an iota. Okay, so we've had reduplication with the perfect, right? The perfect reduplicates, like leluka. But when the perfect reduplicates, it repeats the letter and adds an epsilon, leluka, where me verbs reduplicate with an iota. So you get dido. But it's only in the present tense stem. So that's important. So you're going to see reduplications, but if it's a me verb, it's not telling you that it's perfect. And the way that you're going to know that it's not perfect is because of the iota. The iota gives it away that it's a me verb and it's not just a perfect reduplication. So that's the first one. Me verbs reduplicate with an iota in the present. Rule 2, me verbs do not ordinarily use a connecting vowel, i.e. thematic vowel in the indicative. The personal ending is added directly to the stem. Okay, so if you look in some grammars and like reference grammars, they will call me verbs athematic verbs. Athematic. And that's because they don't have a theme vowel. So here, rather than adding omen to the stem, you're just adding men to the stem, because the omicron here is part of the stem. So didωmin here, you can see, is it has the reduplication with the iota because it's in the present. You have the stem, the do, and then you just slap the ending men there, and then the omicron lengthens, which is the next one. Or rule 4 probably. Let's go down to rule 4. So rule 4, the stem vowel of the me verbs can lengthen, shorten, or drop out. So that's what happens there. The stem vowel is lengthening. But let's go back up to rule 3 here. Me verbs employ 3 different personal endings in the present active. And we've already seen these. Me, seen, and aseen are 3 new endings that you have to be aware of. In rule 4, the stem vowel of the me verbs can lengthen, shorten, or drop out. So just don't be surprised when there's changes here and there in me verbs. It's not always regular, or you can't really predict it all the time. So you just have to just realize that it happens, and don't be shocked when it happens. Okay, and the last one, this is a bit annoying as well. Most of the me verbs use ka as their tense formative in the aorist, okay, rather than sa. So we're used to saying sa in the aorist, but many me verbs use ka instead. So edoka. How do you know that this isn't perfect? Right? Because we're used to the perfect having the ka. Well, you know, because there's no reduplication, right? It's not dedo ka. It's just edoka. It just has the augment. So because there's an augment, you should be thinking aorist or imperfect. And so just be aware of this. You might see ka rather than sa with me verbs. So those are the 5 rules of me verbs. If you get these down, or at least know that these exist, it's probably good to memorize them. Hopefully this will make me verbs easier, or at least not as scary. So let's look here at our endings. So, okay, let me pull up. Okay, so I put the rules here on a document so that we can see them all at the same time. So here is the present system of didωmi. And so rule 1, me verbs reduplicate their initial stem. We see the did, right? We have the reduplication with the iota in the present. There's no connecting vowel. We just have the omega and the omicron here with the endings slapped on them. Rule 2. Rule 3, we have the different personal endings, me, seen, and aseen. In rule 4, the stem vowel can lengthen or shorten or drop out. We see that, where we have an omega here in the singular, and we have an omicron here in the plural. So it's lengthened in the singular and not in the plural. And then rule 5, most me verbs take ka. So this doesn't, we're not looking at the aorist, so this isn't relevant. Okay, now let's look. So present, these are subjunctive. We just see the lengthening that we're used to form the subjunctive. So nothing new there. The imperative, these are all the same endings. Nothing new there. Participles, there's really nothing new here either. Same endings. Just know in the present, we still have the do. And notice that in the subjunctive, since we're still in the present tense stem, we still have the reduplication with the iota in all of these present endings. However, once we get to the aorist system, pull this up again, notice we don't have did do. There's no did here at the start. So rule 1, since we're not in the present, we don't have the reduplication. There's no connecting vowel. Rule 3, we're not in the present active, so Rule 3 doesn't apply. Rule 4, it looks like it's all omega here in the aorist. And Rule 5, we have ka in their aorist. And we can see that there. So it's the aorist. As we go and see the different forms, so this is the aorist active subjunctive. Notice there's nothing new about the endings. The difference between the aorist subjunctive and the present subjunctive is, in the aorist, we don't have the reduplication. And we don't have an augment. Okay, yeah, we don't have the reduplication because we're not in the present with the me verb, the did, do. And we don't have the augment because we're in the subjunctive. We're not in the indicative anymore. And so we're used to that. We're used to subjunctives and imperatives and participles not having the augment in the aorist. So basically we're reduced all the way down to just the stem here in the aorist subjunctive. So we just have do for the first person. And you can see in the imperatives here, we don't have the did, do as well. In the aorist, we don't as well have the reduplication. Because we're in the aorist, outside of the present, we don't have the reduplication with the iota. So hopefully that was helpful, seeing those rules and how they apply. And these will apply over the other me verbs as well that we'll cover in the next 2 chapters. So get those rules down and look at the different forms. If you want to look at more forms, you can go to the paradigms at the end of the book to compare, use the rules and look through all the forms and see how they apply. Okay, then Croy then here adds a few irregular adjectives, and these are nothing to be really afraid of. So we have palus, which really is only us, un, u are the only things that are new here. Otherwise, it's all normal endings that you should recognize by now with nouns. And then does megas, and really these are all the same endings as well that you're used to. The only difference here is in the feminine and then in the plural, the stem lengthens. So notice in the masculine and neuter, singular, we have megas, mega. Well, and I guess in the genitive and dative as well, it lengthens. Where it adds this al, megalu, megalo, megaloi, has that al on it. So it's one of those that just has like a shortened version and then a longer version for some reason. So it's irregular. And then that brings us to the end. So we are getting close. We are getting so close to the end here. So keep working hard.